I'm a billionaire father. Seeing a black waitress dance with my disabled son changed my life. Welcome back with a new real shock story. Before we start, comment and tell me which city you're watching from. At the end, don't forget to subscribe and rate it from 0 to 10. Let's enjoy the story, everyone. You know, some days start so ordinary you barely notice them, but other days, they change everything. I remember that day like it happened yesterday. It was one of those evenings when the air felt different, heavy, almost alive. I wasn't expecting anything unusual. I was just going to grab a coffee. That was it. Just a normal walk, a little quiet time before heading home. I had been working long hours, running errands, trying to balance everything. Life was a blur. But that day, something pulled me away from my usual routine. Maybe it was the tiredness in my bones. Maybe it was just fate. Whatever it was, I ended up walking toward this small cafe tucked away at the corner of a quiet street. It wasn't fancy. No big signs, no flashy lights. Just soft music spilling out through the open door. Inside, there was warmth. The kind of warmth that doesn't just come from heaters or coffee machines. It comes from people. I noticed him right away. He wasn't sitting like most people do, relaxed and sipping their drink. No, he was tense, watching something. And beside him, a boy. His boy. The boy's movements were slow, careful, each one deliberate, as if the world demanded more from him than it gave back. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see everything. The father, tall, confident, the kind of man you imagine controls every part of his world, was watching quietly. His eyes didn't leave the boy. I could tell there was something protective there, something fragile. The boy tried to move his foot. It faltered. He tried again. His father's eyes tightened, not in anger, but in worry. And then she came. She wasn't loud. She didn't announce herself. She just moved across the room like she belonged there, carrying a tray with quiet grace. Her uniform was simple. Her expression, soft. But when she looked at the boy, her whole face changed. There was this light in her eyes, not pity, but understanding. She knelt beside him without a word, and then she extended her hand, just one hand, and the boy looked up at her, unsure. I could almost hear his thoughts. Can I? Should I? His breath caught. The father leaned forward but stayed silent. I couldn't take my eyes off them. The moment stretched, longer than it should have. Then slowly, hesitantly, the boy placed his hand in hers, and he stepped. One step, then another. The cafe seemed to hush. I could feel the sound of every movement, the soft shuffle of his shoes, the quiet hum of the cafe. People glanced up. Some smiled, others just stared, but nobody spoke. The father's face, I'll never forget it. Pride mixed with something I can't describe. Pain, maybe. Or fear. Because what happened next wasn't just about a dance step. It was about something much bigger. The waitress began to hum softly. Not loud, not obvious, just enough that only they could hear. The boy started to move. Slowly, carefully, matching her steps. His head tilted, his lips parted slightly. It was almost a whisper of courage. And then, just as the moment began to feel peaceful, the air shifted. From somewhere in the cafe came a murmur. A few people leaning over, whispering under their breath. Then one voice, sharp, cold. I turned. Across the room, a man had stood. He wasn't just watching. He was walking toward them. His steps were heavy, his face tense. The father didn't move. The boy froze. The waitress stayed where she was, holding the boy's hand. The man's voice cut through everything. What's going on here? It wasn't a question, it was a challenge. The cafe went quiet. You could feel the tension hanging like smoke in the air. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Something told me this was the start of something that wasn't going to end quietly. That moment, it was the first step into a story none of us were ready for. I remember the way the cafe seemed to change in that moment. The hum of conversation died completely, replaced by this thick silence, heavy and tense. I could almost hear my own heartbeat. The man who'd spoken was standing there now, staring at the waitress and Liam, not with curiosity, but with something sharper, something that felt like judgment. The father's shoulders stiffened. Liam's small hand tightened around the waitress's fingers. I swear I could see his whole body trembling. It wasn't just fear. It was confusion. I could see it in his eyes, like he was asking himself why this was happening. Why a moment that should have been safe and beautiful was suddenly turning into something dangerous. The waitress didn't let go. Her eyes stayed fixed on Liam. Her lips moved slightly but softly, like she was saying something to him. I couldn't hear it, but it felt intimate, protective. Like she was telling him, "It's okay, I've got you." The man stepped closer. His voice was low, but it carried through the silence. "This isn't your place. He shouldn't be doing this." There was no question there, only an accusation. The father finally spoke, quietly, but with something in his tone I couldn't quite place. It's his choice. His words felt heavy, like they carried more weight than just a simple sentence. The waitress gave a small nod, but didn't let Liam go. Instead, she gave him a gentle squeeze of encouragement. And then, he stepped again, not perfectly, not without hesitation. But he stepped again, not perfectly. And I swear, in that moment, the whole cafe seemed to lean forward. You could feel every eye in the room on them. There was this strange mix of emotions: curiosity, awe, confusion, even anger. It was like everyone was holding their breath. The man's voice rose, sharper this time. "Stop this. You're embarrassing him. You're embarrassing yourself." He stepped even closer, blocking part of the light in the room. His shadow fell across them. I could feel the air grow heavier. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to shout at him, but I stayed in my seat, frozen, my fingers tightening around my coffee cup. I couldn't look away, not because I wanted to watch them suffer, but because something in me knew this was important. This wasn't just about a moment. This was about something far bigger. The father looked at Liam, and for the first time that night, I saw him smile softly. Not at anyone else, just at his son. The kind of smile that says, "I'm here. I'm with you." Liam took another step. The murmur in the cafe grew louder. I could feel people shifting in their seats. Phones were quietly pulled out. I could see the waitress's lips pressed together in determination. And then, just before things could spiral further, the boy looked up. His gaze was steady, strong. And in his eyes, I swear, there was this unshakable truth that this moment belonged to him. That's when it happened. The sound of footsteps. Not from the man, not from the father, but from somewhere behind. And a quiet, growing murmur that turned into whispers. Then words. Words that none of us could ignore. And in that moment, I knew this was not the end. The murmurs grew louder, spreading like wildfire through the cafe. You could feel it ripple through the air. People leaned forward, some whispering to each other, others staring in silence. I could almost see the tension pressing against every wall, every face. The light above seemed dimmer now, as if the room itself knew something important was unfolding. The man who'd spoken earlier was still there. His expression hardened. He crossed his arms like he was guarding some truth he wanted the rest of us to accept without question. But the father, he didn't move. He didn't speak. He just kept looking at Liam, steady and unwavering. The waitress stayed kneeling beside him, her grip firm but gentle. I noticed her shoulders shaking ever so slightly. Whether from exhaustion, fear, or determination, I couldn't tell. But she didn't let go. That small, quiet act felt braver than anything I'd seen that day. Liam took another step. His breathing was uneven, his face flushed, but he didn't stop. He looked up at his father, then back at the waitress like he was searching for approval. And I could see the tears starting in his eyes. Not sadness, not fear, something else, hope. The man stepped forward again, his voice sharper this time, carrying a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Stop this now. Don't make a fool of him. Don't make a fool of yourself." The words cut through the air like a blade. The cafe went quieter, almost like people were afraid to breathe. Liam's small hand trembled in hers, but the waitress kept him steady. And then the father spoke again. This is exactly who he is, and who he wants to be. Those words hung in the air like smoke. I could feel something shift. People glanced at each other. Phones lifted higher. Some faces showed surprise. Others showed judgment. But no one moved. No one spoke. The tension grew heavier. Liam looked up, his breathing shaky, but his steadier. Then something unexpected happened. The waitress, she smiled, not a loud smile, not an obvious one, but a quiet, determined smile. And she began to hum softly again. It wasn't just a sound, it was a signal. A promise. A shield. Liam matched her steps again. Slower now, but with more confidence. He started to laugh quietly, almost to himself, and it was so pure, so fragile, that it made my throat tighten. The man stepped back, his face dark. But something in the air had changed. People weren't whispering in confusion anymore. They were whispering in awe. Some pulled out their phones. Others just watched, unable to look away. I leaned forward without realizing it, because I couldn't stop watching this quiet, small act that had grown into something monumental. I could feel the father's chest rise and fall more calmly now. Liam kept moving, step by step, until the space between them seemed to disappear. And then, everything shifted. A loud voice came from the corner. Not the man's voice, not the father's. A voice that wasn't meant to be part of this moment, but became part of it anyway. "What are you doing?" The entire room froze. The hum stopped. The moment broke. And I knew. The rising tide had only just begun. The voice cut through the air like thunder. It came from a man standing near the back of the cafe. Tall, with a coat pulled tight against him. I could see the anger in his face, but also confusion. Like he couldn't quite understand what was happening in front of him. The entire cafe seemed to shift. Conversation stopped entirely. Cups clinked against saucers. Chairs scraped against the floor. Everyone was suddenly holding their breath. I could feel the tension thrum in my own chest. The man who'd been confronting Liam and the waitress stepped forward, pointing at them. "This isn't normal. You're letting him do this in public. You're making a scene." His voice cracked under the weight of his words. But the father didn't flinch. He stayed where he was, his gaze fixed on Liam. "You don't understand," the father said quietly but firmly. "This is not a scene. This is his choice." His voice was steady, even soft, but it cut through everything. Liam looked up. His eyes, wide and trembling, met his father's. Then he turned to the waitress again. Her hand was still holding his. She gave him a small nod, almost imperceptible. And I swear, at that moment, something changed in him. He took another step forward, then another. And suddenly the whole cafe seemed to lean forward with him. Every person was watching. Phones lifted. The air grew heavy with silence, broken only by the sound of Liam's footsteps. The man's voice grew louder, desperate now. "Stop. You don't know what you're doing." But Liam didn't stop. His steps were slower now, but stronger. There was something about his courage that felt shocking. The waitress hummed again, softly at first, then louder. Liam matched her step, and for a moment it was like the world disappeared. I could see his father's chest rise and fall as he watched his son. His lips pressed together, like he was holding back tears. And then, without warning, Liam stumbled. His foot caught on the edge of the step. For a second, my heart stopped. The room gasped. But before he could fall, the waitress steadied him. Her grip tightened, and her voice, though quiet, carried something powerful. "You got this." Liam smiled through his struggle, a small, trembling smile, and took another step, and then another. And it was like watching something incredible unfold in slow motion. Not because it was perfect, though because it was real. The man stepped back now, his anger gone, replaced by something else. Shock, maybe shame. People were whispering in awe. Some were crying quietly. The hum of the waitress's voice grew louder until the whole cafe seemed to hum with it. And then Liam stopped. He looked around at every face, at every eye in the room. He looked at his father, and for the first time, I could see pure pride in the father's eyes. Then Liam stepped forward again. And in that moment, it felt like the world had shifted. That was the moment I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The cafe stayed silent for what felt like minutes, though it was probably only seconds. Liam stood there, hand still in the waitress's, breathing hard, sweat shining on his forehead. His small chest rose and fell with every breath, and I could see tears pooling in his eyes. Not tears of pain, not tears of fear, but tears of something much deeper. Pride, relief, victory. His father stepped forward slowly, almost reverently. I could hear his shoes scraping softly against the floor. When he reached them, he placed his hand gently on Liam's shoulder. Not a touch of force, just steady support. And I swear, the entire cafe seemed to hold its breath again. The man who had shouted earlier was still there, staring, his face unreadable. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. No applause, no commentary, just silence. And somehow that silence spoke louder than any words could. The waitress squeezed Liam's hand one last time before letting go. She straightened, brushing back her hair, and gave him a small nod. He smiled, shaky but certain, like he'd just done something impossible. And maybe he had. The father pulled Liam into a quiet embrace, and I could hear him whisper something I couldn't quite make out. But it didn't matter. The meaning was clear. They had crossed something together, something deeper than just a dance. They had crossed a barrier of fear, of doubt, of judgment. I sat there, watching, my throat tight. I could feel my own heart pounding, my chest aching with a strange mix of sadness and hope, because I knew this moment wasn't just theirs. It belonged to every person who had ever been told they couldn't stand, couldn't move, couldn't be seen. That day, I learned something I'll never forget. That courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it hums softly, and sometimes it takes a small hand holding yours to change everything. When I left the cafe later that night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. About Liam, about his father, about the waitress, about all of us, and what it means to truly see each other. And I kept asking myself the same question. How many more moments like this do we need before the world finally wakes up? Because this wasn't just a story about a dance. It was a story about humanity, about courage, about change, and maybe, just maybe, it was a story that could change the world.